Hello students, today I am going to elaborate on physiology of hearing, especially the role of inner ear, auditory pathway and the auditory cortex. This picture shows the anatomy of ear consisting of external, middle and internal ear. The structures in blue shade depicts the internal ear. The internal ear is situated in the petrous part of the temporal bone. Structurally, it is divided into outer bony labyrinth that surrounds the inner membranous labyrinth. The membranous labyrinth consists of two apparatus. One is the vestibular apparatus containing saccule, utricle and semicircular canals which are primarily concerned with equilibrium. The other one is the auditory apparatus consisting of cochlea, and this is a structure which is specialized for hearing. What is the role of inner ear in hearing? In my previous video, I had discussed how the sound waves are able to enter into the internal ear after impedance matching mechanism performed by the middle ear. Now the transduction of mechanical sound waves into electrical signals occurs in the organ of corti of the cochlea, which are transmitted to the brain for perception. A few words on anatomy of cochlea to understand the receptors of hearing. Cochlea is a snail-shaped fluid-filled coiled tube. It has got an outer bony spiral canal that lodges an inner membranous cochlear duct. The bony cochlea is part of the bony labyrinth. In humans, the cochlea is 35 mm length and makes around 2 and 3 by 4 turns around a central bony core called as the modulus. The membranous cochlea is the cochlear duct which is part of the membranous labyrinth. In the cross-sectional view of cochlea, the resinous membrane and basilar membrane are present, which divide the cochlea into three fluid-filled compartments called as the scala vestibuli, scala media and scala tympani. So this is cochlea in its cross-sectional view. This is the resinous membrane and below you have the basilar membrane. Both these membranes divide the cochlea into three compartments. The upper compartment is called as a scala vestibuli, the middle compartment is called as the scala media and the lower compartment is called as the scala tympani. So scala vestibuli is a compartment above the resinous membrane and is filled with perilymph. Scala media is a compartment between resinous membrane and basilar membrane, and this space is filled with endolymph which is rich in potassium ions. This endolymph is secreted by a layer of fibrous vascular tissue called as stria vascularis present on the lateral wall of the scala media. On the basilar membrane are located the organ of Corti which contains the receptors for hearing. The scala tympani is a space below the basilar membrane and is filled with perilymph. The organ of Corti is a specialized structure situated on the basilar membrane, and this contains the hair cells which are the receptors for hearing. So hair cells are the receptors for hearing situated in the organ of Corti which is located in the cochlea of the inner ear. When the sound waves reach the organ of Corti, the receptors act as a transducer to convert the mechanical sound energy into action potentials in the cochlear nerve. There are two types of hair cells, inner and outer hair cells. The inner hair cells are 3500 in number in the cochlea and they form a single row along the entire length of the cochlea. There are three rows of outer hair cells, about 20,000 in number, present lateral to the tunnel of Corti. The apical ends of the hair cells contain cilia that passes through the reticulolamina and project into thin, flexible, gelatinous tectorial membrane. The hair cell is a cup-shaped structure with fine cilia called as the stereocilia. There is no kinocilium in the cochlear hair cells, unlike the hair cells in the vestibular apparatus. The tips of the cilia are linked to each other by minute strands called the tipplings, which help the bundle of stereocilia to move as a unit. Now the mechanically sensitive cation channels called transduction channels are present at the junction of cilia with the tipplings. How the transduction of the sound waves occur. It starts with the vibration of the basilar membrane. Sound waves from the middle ear enter into the inner ear through the oval window by in and out motion of the stapes. Sound waves entering into the inner ear spread along the scala vestibuli like a traveling wave. Most of the sound energy is transferred directly to the scala tympani, which makes the basilar membrane to vibrate. In the picture, you can see the sound waves entering into the inner ear travel along scala vestibuli like a traveling wave, and they directly reach the scala tympani, which causes the vibration of the basilar membrane. So they reach directly to the scala tympani. The up and down movements of the basilar membrane in turn causes the organ of Corti also to vibrate up and down. As I told earlier, the cilia of hair cells passes through the reticular lamina and are embedded in the tectorial membrane. Since tectorial membrane and basilar membrane are attached at different points on the limbus, they slide past each other when up and down vibration of the organ of Corti occurs. When the organ of Corti moves up, the tectorial membrane slides forward relative to the basilar membrane, and this bends the stereocilia away from the modulus. On the contrary, when the organ of Corti moves down, the tectorial membrane slides backwards relative to the basilar membrane, which bends the stereocilia towards the modulus. Thus, the movement of cilia in both directions can stimulate the hair cells. When the stereocilia bend towards the stria vascularis, this stria vascularis is present in the lateral wall of the scala media, that is away from the modulus. That is, when the stereocilia bends towards stria vascularis and away from the modulus, depolarization of the hair cell occurs. On the contrary, when moving towards the modulus, hyperpolarization occurs. This is called as the receptor potential. So the hair cell is cup-shaped with stereocilia on its top. The height of the stereocilia gradually increases towards the lateral edge of the hair cell. Therefore, the longest stereocilia is towards the stria vascularis. When the stereocilia bends towards stria vascularis present in the lateral wall of scala media, that is away from the modulus, depolarization occurs. Whereas when it moves towards the modulus, hyperpolarization occurs. There are two types of potentials recorded in the hair cells. One type is recorded in the resting condition of hair cells, and the other type is recorded when the ear is stimulated by the sound waves. The potentials which can be recorded under resting condition of the hair cells are endocochlear potential, the other one is the resting potential of the hair cell. The endolymph contains high concentration of potassium ions of nearly 135 milliequivalents per liter when compared to that of the perilymph. The source of these potassium ions are the stria vascularis, which is present in the lateral wall of the scala media. The electrical potential of about 80 millivolts existing between the endolymph and the perilymph is called as the endolymphatic or endocochlear potential. Each hair cell has got a negative resting membrane potential. So the intracellular fluid is at a potential of about minus 70 millivolts with respect to the perilymph of the scala tympani. At the upper end of the hair cell, the potential difference between the intracellular fluid and the endolymph is minus 150 millivolts. So, the larger negative potential and a very smaller potassium concentration difference makes the hair cells very sensitive, and even the slightest movement can stimulate the hair cells. Now, how the receptor potential is generated. Hair cell is a mechanoreceptor which is very sensitive to the direction and the movement of the cilia. When the shorter stereocilia bend towards the taller stereocilia, that is towards the stria vascularis, the cation channels open, which allows the entry of potassium and calcium ions into the hair cell. The resulting depolarization causes opening of the voltage gated calcium channels present at the base of the hair cell. So the cytoplasmic calcium concentration increases, which leads to the fusion of synaptic vesicles with the release of glutamate, that is a neurotransmitter, into the synaptic cleft, producing action potentials in the efferent nerve endings. When the cilia is pushed away from the taller stereocilia, that is towards modulus, the apical transduction channels closes, leading to hyperpolarization. So in this picture you can see when the shorter stereocilia bends towards the taller stereocilia, the cation channels, that is the potassium and calcium channels, open, and this allows the entry of potassium and calcium ions into the hair cell, and this causes the depolarization of the hair cell. When the stereocilia are pushed away from the taller stereocilia, that is towards modulus, the apical transduction channels, they all close, and this leads to the hyperpolarization of the hair cells. When the ear is stimulated by sound, two types of dynamic potentials can be recorded. One is the cochlear microphonic potential, the other one is called as the action potential of the auditory nerve. So as we all know, the receptor potential is produced by each and every hair cell, and the sum of all these receptor potentials of the hair cells is called as the cochlear microphonic potential. This potential arises before the action potentials of the auditory nerve, and there is no latency or no refractory period when compared to that of the action potentials. As I told earlier, during the genesis of receptor potentials, depolarization of hair cell causes the opening of voltage-gated calcium channels at the base of the hair cell. This results in the release of the neurotransmitter glutamate into the synaptic cleft, and this produces the action potentials in the efferent nerve fibers. As the loudness of sound increases, the frequency of the action potentials in a single auditory fiber is also going to increase, and vice versa also happens. Otosclerosis is a localized disease of the aortic capsule where the normal lamellar bone of the stapes is replaced by the spongy bone. Because of the spongy nature of the bone, the footplate of the stapes is fixed on the oval window. So there is no inward and outward movement of the stapes, and this leads to failure of transmission of sound waves from the middle ear to the internal ear. And this leads to conductive deafness in such patients. Meniere's disease is called endolymphatic hydrops, where there are disturbances in the fluid formation in the inner ear. Here there is excessive formation of the endolymph, and the triad we notice here is deafness, episodic vertigo, and tinnitus. So the external and middle ear conducts the sound waves from the environment into the internal ear. The internal ear, through its receptors, converts the mechanical sound waves into electrical signals, and now they should be transmitted to the cerebral cortex through the auditory pathway. So now we'll see the course of this auditory pathway. Each nerve fiber forms synapse with only one hair cell, but a single hair cell can receive synaptic connections from 8 to 30 nerve fibers. The inner hair cells constitute only 15 to 20% of the hair cells, but they can receive 90 to 95% of the efferent nerve endings, and that's why they can be rightly called as the actual receptors for hearing. So inner hair cells are the actual receptors for hearing. On the other hand, the outer hair cells receive only 5 to 10% of the efferent neurons. The axons of the efferent neurons constitute the auditory, otherwise called as the cochlear division of the 8th cranial nerve, and this project on to the brainstem. So the first order neurons start from the hair cells. The cochlear nerves are the bipolar neurons, and they have their cell bodies present in the spiral ganglion located in the modulus. These nerves project on to the ipsilateral cochlear nuclei present in the medulla. So in this picture you can see a cochlear nerve. It is a bipolar neuron with its cell body located in the spiral ganglion, and the dendritic process innervate the hair cells, whereas the axon continues as the auditory nerve fiber, which is going to end on the cochlear nucleus present in the medulla. Second order neurons have their cell bodies in the cochlear nuclei. There are two cochlear nuclei, one is dorsal, the other one is a ventral cochlear nuclei present in the medulla. Most of them cross to the opposite side, but some fibers remain uncrossed. The crossing fibers of two sides form a mass of fibers called as the trapezoid body. Superior olivary nucleus is the most common site of origin of the third order neuron. Sometimes it can arise from trapezoid body nucleus or nucleus of lateral lemniscus. Axons of the superior olivary complex ascends as lateral lemniscus bilaterally to the inferior colliculus. Fourth order neuron arises from the inferior colliculus, which is located in the midbrain. It is a major center for the integration of auditory sensory information, which projects to the auditory portion of the thalamus. In this picture, we can see the cochlear nerve starting from the hair cells end in the dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus. From here, most of the fibers cross to the opposite side to terminate in the superior olivary complex. The third order neurons begins in the superior olivary complex and ascends up as the lateral lemniscus and finally terminate in the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. The fifth order neurons start from the medial geniculate body of the thalamus, pass through the internal capsule as the acoustic radiation, and finally terminate in the primary auditory cortex. So the cochlear nerve starts from the hair cells, and this is the first order neuron which ends on the dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus. From here the second order neuron begins and they cross to the opposite side to end on the superior olivary complex. From the superior olivary complex the third order neurons originate and they ascend upwards as a lateral lemniscus and reach the inferior colliculus of the brain. In the midbrain, from the inferior colliculus arises the fourth order neuron, which terminates at the medial geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. From the medial geniculate body of the thalamus arises the fifth order neuron, which projects on to the auditory cortex which projects on to the primary auditory cortex. The primary auditory cortex is located in the sylvian fissure in the superior portion of the temporal lobe. The cochlea has got a point-to-point projection to the auditory cortex, like high tones are represented posteromedially and low tones are represented in its anterolateral part. It also has isofrequency columns for various frequencies. The primary auditory cortex comprises of two areas. One is the primary auditory area, the other one is the auditory association areas. Area 41 is called as the primary auditory area. Pitch, intensity and quality of sound is better appreciated by this area. As I said earlier, it has got isofrequency columns. That is, the neurons arranged in each column has got the same characteristic frequency. So when there is selective destruction of this area, it causes deafness only for that particular column of frequency. Areas 20, 21 and 22 are auditory association areas. They help in the analysis, interpretation of the auditory stimulus. Area 20 and 21 are present in the middle and inferior temporal gyrus, whereas area 22 is the Wernicke's area and this is located in the superior temporal gyrus. So this area helps in the comprehension of the auditory signals. The salient features of the cortex are there is a bilateral representation in the cortex from medulla onwards, and it sends collaterals to the reticular activating system also, and this plays a role in the arousal mechanism, tonotopic organization, hemispherical specialization and plasticity of auditory pathways. The relation between the spatial location of the nerve fibers and characteristic frequency is going to be maintained not only for the 8th nerve fibers but throughout the entire auditory pathway, right from the 8th nerve, cochlear nucleus, superior olivary complex, inferior colliculus and medial geniculate body, and finally in the auditory cortex. This is called as a tonotopic organization, which is very similar to the retinotopic organization of the visual cortex. These are the isofrequency columns. Each column is representing one characteristic frequency. So, in case of selective destruction of the auditory cortex, the person will be insensitive to only that particular frequency. The auditory area shows marked hemispherical specialization. Area 22 in the right side is related to melody, pitch and sound intensities, whereas area 22 in the left side is concerned with the language processing of Auditory information. Auditory areas show cortical plasticity. There is a notable plasticity existing in the auditory pathways, that is, the anatomical structure can be modified by experience. The musicians have a larger auditory area which are frequently activated by the musical tones, and the individuals who become blind early in their life, they are better in localizing the sound rather than the persons with normal eyesight. So, in this video, I had given a short glimpse on the role of the internal ear, auditory pathway, and the auditory cortex in the process of hearing. Thank you.